Terry and Julie, thank you so much for coming back. You have been amazingly supportive of this whole Thwack Camp effort, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Leon.
Thank you, Leon.
And for those people who are joining us, this is a continuation of the conversation we had about half an hour ago before the bacon back scratcher commercial that was on the main stage with Tom LaRock. That was fascinating. The database part was fascinating also, but the bacon back scratcher was just something else. So we are still talking about how we have sort of forged our career in IT out of monitoring. And we want to open that up to any questions that people may have had during the actual session. One thing I want to kick off with is just to underscore something. Terry, in the session, you had said that learning to speak in terms the business understands. You talked about the FisherPrice presentation, was it?
Yes. So we call them FisherPrice because we would say that in order for a executive who doesn't know anything about IT, he just funds it in one way or another with a bunch of competing resources. We had to make it so that he could understand the presentation. And in order to do that, we would use, bright colors and, large objects and very few words and whatnot, just so that we could make sure that they could understand it. I got more than once stopped and said, I know, Terry, we know that you're very familiar with this, but we're not. So can you make it very simple for us? And I, $1 million decisions, sometimes transportation. So it's something they can understand.
Yeah, we had a little trouble with the audio, but we got the gist of where you were going with that. And I think you clarified. I mean, the FisherPrice presentation is poking good-natured fun at our management colleagues, also the managers who do our yearly reviews and are often in charge of our raises. So, just want to clarify that. But later on, you also specified that using terminology that was industry specific, that using, putting things in terms that the business itself was thinking about all the time, whether it was roads or it was construction equipment or it was bridges, like that kind of thing. That really helped to frame things in a familiar way. It's not really about dumbing it down. It's about making sure that we aren't speaking tech to somebody who hasn't spent part of their lifetime immersed in the technology. And what I thought was interesting in the comments about that was that people were saying, yeah, Power BI and Excel, that's the way that you need to speak it. And I want, Julie, because you worked in the financial area, I wanted to just get your take on that. How effective is it when you start presenting the, things in terms of business numbers versus the, how is it that putting things in terms of business numbers versus like tech numbers? Like, how do you bridge that gap?
As Terry alluded to, pictures say 1,000 words all the time. So basically, as you said, the business people, they don't have the technical experience, but they can understand the pictures, the graphs, the numbers, and things like that. So it comes to them, very simply. And that's what, everybody wants in the end, is to understand what's going on, to be on the same page, and, to move forward from there.
Okay. Cool. Terry, anything to add to that?
No, not really. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Cool. So I want to pivot to another question that came up during the chat, which we talked about how to be convincing. But really, nuts and bolts, as an IT person, how do we get them to say yes? How do we get them to agree to monitoring at all? Because I think that's a hurdle that lots of people have. How do we get them to agree to paying for upgrades, or in SolarWinds terms, continuing to pay maintenance so that you get upgrades? How do you get them to say yes to new modules that you know are valuable? Like, what are some of your tricks as far as that goes?
Well, I always lead with technical debt as far as keeping things current. The term technical debt it's pretty well known in the industry, but basically the second that you bring an asset on, it starts aging and be moving from an asset to debt, meaning that you either have to keep it upgraded or you accumulate debt like you would on a credit card. So one of the things that we warn them about is getting too late in the payments of keeping your stuff means that a bill will come due later on where you have to do a full upgrade or you have a security flaw or whatnot. And speaking of security, we always emphasize the security fixes inside of any of our upgrades, because those are usually very important and very well understood by management that they got to keep things current in order to stay on the latest current releases. We also push, I push three specific agendas. Security is number one, and then stability is number two, because people don't intentionally release new products with instability, but they're mainly meant to more stabilize the platform. So we push for it from stability standpoint. And performance is usually the third one that I push. So those are the three legs of the stool that I generally make my arguments on.
Cool. Julie?
Right. And before monitoring, issues are mostly reactive and you wait for the calls and complaints, basically. With monitoring, yeah, you can actually watch, plan, your resources actually become smarter because they can see what traffic looks like when it's normal. And then they can react faster and more efficiently when things become abnormal. So upgrades, NCM, and the improvements that have come with it, showing those CVEs, the common vulnerabilities and exposure. In my world, that's everything. So that alone, just showing, hey, here's the list, it's time to upgrade. So that's become really important in what we do actually as far as security. And with NPM, you see the hidden bandwidth that you weren't able to see before, that's being overutilized, errors, discards, things that you just don't see, just looking at something, and a historical type thing. So planning has been a great thing when using monitoring.
Well, and I think where we're going with this is also the best way to justify the next purchase or upgrade is to make sure that you have identified the value of the current one. Yeah. That if you aren't turning your current monitoring into, if you aren't not turning it into it, but translating it into business value, then you're missing the opportunity to say that purchase you just made, that was worth it. So for example, and we've talked at SolarWinds about this a few different times, but saying that this event that just occurred without monitoring took us 8 hours and 4 technicians to resolve. And now we found it, we found out about it within 20 minutes, not 2 hours. It took us 1 tech because we knew about it far enough in advance that we could, do it a little bit more mindfully and a little bit more in a more organized way. And therefore, instead of it costing us, $100, I'm just obviously making up $100, it only cost us $50. Once you know that, then every time you get that alert, every time you get that, you get that information in, then you're able to say that was $50 in the bank. That's another $50 in the bank. And to say, hey, that alert triggered, 15 times last month. That's, another, whatever, $750. But that's another X number of dollars that we just saved with our current investment. Whether you're talking about storage or you're talking about network bandwidth, you're talking about, one example I like to use is that I was at a company where we turned on monitoring for when a backup circuit, which was a cellular circuit, came up. Not when the primary went down, but when the backup circuit came up. And what we were able to do is correlate that the circuit was coming up when the primary was also okay. They were just testing it. And in the first month of that alert, we saved $3,522 because we're able to go back to the vendor and say, that wasn't us. Our circuit never went down. So once you have this ongoing building case of our current monitoring is saving us this, can you imagine how much more NCM, SCM, NetFlow would save us? I would be able to know this thing and that thing and the other thing. That would be so valuable. That's another way that we can help management feel good about approving the next purchase. I don't know if you have any reflections on that.
I think that the comments are spot on, and ones we've seen a lot. We like to make sure that they understand the value statement of SolarWinds to begin with. And we constantly look for what we have now versus what we had before and try to bring those up and throw those as tidbits that our management can then take out to their stakeholders, who are the consumers of the network and the business entities that are the consumers of that. And they can then utilize that and saying, hey, look, haven't you noticed that things have been more stable? Haven't you noticed that the network isn't the problem anymore? Now the problem is you don't have access to this app or that app. It shifts the problem away from the network being the issue and moves it more to where the problems really are. Julie and I are where we're currently working. We had a core network that surrounds the whole state, and it goes from point to point to point to point, and then we have tail circuits that come off of that. Well, you can't see the aggregation of traffic and how the links in between the point to point to points are, unless you have something monitoring them and really until you start creating visuals like with the maps and other things. And once we saw that, we could see how these were choke points for all the users that were hanging off the end. And we were easily able to then not just get an upgrade for SolarWinds, but also get an upgrade on the network and move from 1 gig links to 10 gig links along this path. And we quickly found out that we're probably going to need 100 meg links not too far in the future. So that's why it's so valuable to continually take those to management so they understand what we're doing for them.
Right, exactly. So this has started a little bit of a conversation in chat that I want to highlight, which is talking about what we need to tell managers, how we need to inform them. And the question was popped up, what do you wish managers had known or done during your career? And one of the responses that immediately came up was, I wish my managers knew what they didn't know, which is sort of a glib sort of response. But then this person clarified it and said, I wish they knew their boundaries and would stay within them. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on how to carefully, politely, with respect for another coworker, say, stay in your lane? Julie,
So,
I'm going to pick on you because I like to.
Okay. That's okay for now. So it brings me to my former manager at the trading firm. And while I was there, he became partner of the firm. And, during bonus time, I'd always remind him who got him there. And it wasn't just me, it was a team of people. And another thing about this manager is I had known him for over 15 years back at United Airlines. And when we would get together as a team, there were things that, each one of us would say, and, the business decisions, they weren't always agreed on, but they were debated and respected by the whole team. So, we can come together to a conclusion with the best answer. And our manager would watch this. He knew this about us, and he always knew that we would always come up with the best answer. And another thing about this manager at the trading firm, he was actually started at United Airlines. I was a supervisor and he was an intern. So you never know later in life what's going to happen. And he was able to build a great team that brought in a lot of money and some good bonuses. So you never know what's going to happen later, and to always have to trust your team. That's why you hired them.
Yeah.
That is the key word.
Go ahead.
Trust is something that I tried to, through my career, to build trust with my management, that they would believe the points we were making. A lot of times you'll see that managers only believe what Gartner says, or they need an external consultant. And generally, when they're doing that, I usually look at that as being unclear. So, as far as they're not really sure that they understand the path forward, and we just need to make it better for them and help them with their trust in our solution. Oftentimes, we get the affirmation from Gartner or somebody like that, but we want them to be able to come to us and trust us and move forward, so that they come to us as the first person, instead of bringing us, hey, Gartner said we should do this.
Right. We know our environment, basically.
Right. I like it. Okay. I want to move on. Talking about our careers, I think that there are the things you need to know now. There's the environment and your environmental awareness. But I think that also there are skills that are just critical over the career that I think that the three of us can look back and see and say, this was the thing that allowed me to be successful. So I want to ask it again. I know we sort of touched on it. We touched on it in the live session, but I want to come back to it and say, what was one of the skills that really, in retrospect, was critical to your career growing and your career being as successful as it could be?
Julie.
Terry, I'm going to make you go first.
Me go first.
Terry.
Okay. So the first thing was technical curiosity, right? If you are not technically curious about stuff, I assume that everybody that's in Thwack Camp is going to be technically curious, because that's why they're here, is to expand those skills and whatnot. I really looked for people that had that. I used to call it the gene. Because when you have the technical curiosity gene, you are bothered by everything that doesn't work perfectly, and you will work on it and grind at it and do those things that make it better than it is today. So when I first saw a SolarWinds tool, which was the engineer's tool set, I immediately started going through all the tools that were in there and went like, oh, I know how I can use this. Oh, I know how I can use this. So there's a constant need to keep looking at those things and saying, how could I apply this and make things better? So that was one of the skills that, well, I should say it's a gene I have that drives other people crazy. And then the other one is being able to have a vision of where you want to get to, and to be able to articulate that vision in a very simple way. They used to call it elevator talk. If you went into an elevator and you happened to be in there and the CFO showed up, he would ask you questions about, what are you working on? What's going on? And he'd want to know you. Even though he didn't know you from Adam, he'd still ask that question. And so somebody told me, always be prepared to answer very crisply 3 little things that you're working on, and working on this, and this. Anyways, I just had that elevator speech ready, and I had to use it one time, and the guy did a double take because I was prepared for the question, and it was just funny situation.
Nice. Okay, Julie.
So for me, in my career, it's being resilient and being patient. So for me, it's being able to explain something is one thing, but a lot of times, you're told no. So, or you're not offered the job that you want to go to, or things like that. But those are the punches that you just take, and maybe you explain again. The initial rejections are, sometimes when I propose an idea, it's out there, and then sometimes a teammate seems to take that idea and enhance it. To me, that's a win. It's not just saying, oh, I was rejected, but to just say, that's okay. We are going to do this together. So, but yeah, it's definitely being resilient and having the patience to get through it.
One of the things as IT people that we fall into is that we become very binary. It's yes or it's no, the end. And I think what we forget is that in most other parts of the business, there's a spectrum of it. No is not automatically no, hell no, never, no. It's not now or whatever. Mm-hmm. And one of those powerful questions as an IT person I found I can ask is, what would I need to show you to make you comfortable saying yes? What is it that you're not hearing from me that would make the difference?
Good point, Leon. We used to have a phrase that we used to call that we used to use that was, if the answer is no, I asked the wrong question. And so in order to get around that, I needed to make sure that I either educated the person better about what the needs are, or the importance of why things are that decision needs to be a yes, or I need to phrase it in some way that makes it more meaningful to that person. So it's really on us to provide them with the correct question that they can say yes to, which ultimately moves towards moving whatever you're trying to get done forward, whether it's buying a new module or buying a new piece of hardware, upgrading or whatever.
Right.
Right.
Some of the things that came up in the chat that I like is, one person said one of the skills that mattered to them was shut up and listen. It is a skill I am still working on. Another one is, again, with the ask them what it takes to say yes, wear them down with details until they say yes. Obviously, there's a reality to that, but I think that, again, recognizing that no doesn't mean never. It just might mean not this quarter or whatever. And Julie, to your point, that also goes for jobs. Like, you didn't get the job. What was missing? What did you need to see? I'll do that next. I will build that skill. I will demonstrate that competence. If that's what was missing, I'll make it happen. I think sometimes we need to be just as tenacious about our interactions in the business as we are with our technical problems. If you approach a technical issue, BGP just collapsed, and your reaction is, oh, well, never mind.
Oh.
Like, you're not an IT person. Like, that's not an IT response. It's like, all right, let me try something else. Right? It's like, that's how it works. So I think we need to be just as tenacious. We've got just a few more minutes left in the session, and I want to ask, the question I want is what's the single most important, the single best piece of advice that someone gave you regarding your career?
Okay. I'll go. Oh, so
okay.
Okay. So a year into my career with UAL, with United, that's where everything started for me. And a year in, we had something called mass exodus, where most of the team just went to other jobs. And these were people that, I learned from, that they were the lead people, and they had taught me and my coworkers, in a 24/7, 14-week rotation environment. And it brought us down to 6 people on the team. And a friend of mine and I were sitting in the car, and I was like, what are we going to do? What's going to happen to us now? And he just looked at me and he just said, we're going to kick butt. And I have taken that
Okay.
with me wherever I go. So basically, hard situations will happen. That's okay. We're going to kick butt. Well, he said it in other ways, but yeah, we're going to kick butt.
I love it. Okay, Terry, bring us home.
I would say that, yeah. So the first thing that somebody told me was that there are no shortcuts, and it took me a while. There's no shortcut to get somebody to say yes. There's no shortcut to getting that next position. There's no short. You have to put in the time, and you have to be thinking about it from the perspective, I'm going to do this job until it's ready to move to the next one or whatever that is. The next thing that I learned through a lot of skin knees was to think enterprise rather than always thinking about my own personal career. If I thought about the enterprise, it would be reflective and my career would blossom in that. In other words, I really didn't push my career along as much as I tried to continue to think of what was the best thing for the enterprise. And then that would show back through other people's responses. And it did through my career. I had a good, successful career in the 40 years I did IT. And then the earliest thing somebody told me that was so helpful to me was when I was carrying a tool bag for Wang Labs back in the 80s of the last century. Somebody said,
Yeah.
find the things that others hate to do and make it your habit. And so there was things that people hated to do, carrying a tool bag, doing PMs, preventive maintenance, that kind of stuff, things that people just hated to do. And I just made it my daily habit. And it was never drudgery when I did that. Once I made it my habit, it just became one of those things that was natural. And then the go-to guy for these things, whether it was mundane or not, always reverted back to, well, let's ask Terry. He'll do anything, right? Like Mikey will eat anything. Terry will work on the worst problems because he'll try and fix them. So those were the three things that I can think about that really helped me.
That's wonderful. Okay, I appreciate, first of all, the two of you coming back on like this. Every conversation I have with you is just a delight and really informative. And I appreciate everyone who jumped into this session and shared their questions and their answers with us. So we are going to wrap it up now and head for the next customer success session. Take it away.